As an adolescent child person, I used to love watching Chicken Run with my family over an unironic bucket of KFC. The year 2000 stop-motion classic had an underlying message about animal cruelty, which was totally lost on us while we munched on juicy cutlets and slightly better than frozen side dishes. You see, us millennials remember the good old days, when portions were plentiful, feeding a small family for the week didn't cost 5% of your monthly salary, and best of all, KFC changed their fryer oil. Chicken Run is a British comedy about a group of chickens about to be turned into pies by their captor and her bungling husband, where they have to formulate a plan to escape with the help of a flying rooster. The memorable characters, timeless animation, and immeasurable charm made Chicken Run a must-watch for Brits around the holidays. Fast forward to today, where the film industry seems to be sucking on the teat of every semi-successful franchise of the last 30 to 40 years and churning out a sequel, remake, or adaptation. So when I heard news of a sequel to Chicken Run coming out at the end of the year, I was pretty skeptical. Today I'm going to be going through every story beat in Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget based on some of the teachings in the book Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. And of course there's spoilers in this video about Chicken Run 2, and please don't forget to hit the like button. The opening image is our main character and hero, Ginger, who you'll remember from the first film after a short voiceover from Rocky recapping the events from the chicken pie farm. This time the chickens that managed to escape the farm are living in some kind of communist hellscape where they squash berries and live like dirty socialist monsters. I'm joking, please don't swat me. We then learn that Ginger and Rocky are expecting their first child. Great sequels take the parts of the first film that make it so special and elevate it, raising the stakes and doubling down on many of its best aspects. The worst sequels are the ones that just try to recreate the original film, shoving it down our throats because nostalgia. Chicken Run 2 so far is challenging Ginger and Rocky's relationship by introducing a child to the mix and doing it within the first few minutes. The theme is then stated early on while Ginger and Rocky look at the wall of posters and memorabilia. Rocky reminiscing about good times while not really thinking about the fact that Ginger probably grew up in an egg enslavement camp. Ginger says she wants to put the past behind us, with Rocky referencing that time in their lives as the glory days.
But these are our glory days. That's who we are.
It's who we were.
This is the central theme of this movie. Most good films have several themes they explore during their runtime, and this one is no exception, but this is the one that informs our main character arc the most. You can tell just from a couple of interactions we're shown that Rocky still isn't keen on the idea of pushing their past behind them, but is doing it to please Ginger. The setup sees the new chicken baby grow up, and life in the chicken commune explored more. We have some economy of story when Rocky heats up some corn to create popcorn, something I'm already out of by this point in the movie. Economy of story referring to the writing device where smaller details are introduced in organic ways in order to justify their use later on. Some of the chicken reconnaissance reveals a chicken farm nearby, where Ginger then has to make a difficult decision about how to proceed as the group's leader. After some thought, she says the group should hide, prompting wild celebrations as the chickens likely don't want to end up under the heat lamp at Sam's Club. This scene leads into the central theme of the film, as it shows Ginger is so desperate to move on from her old self, she would rather cower away and hide than stand up and fight. Speaking of which, it turns out their daughter Molly is just as outgoing and unpredictable as her parents, in other words, an absolute pain in the ass. Molly is basically a representation of Ginger's older self, someone who doesn't want to live in a cage and desires
Freedom.
The B story for this film also involves Molly. Her attitude and desire for exploration is something Ginger and Rocky are trying to dilute, stopping her from getting into trouble as she grows up and dodging questions about the real world, desperate to hide her from the harsh reality of their human overlords.
There's nothing over there for us.
What about the stuff Uncle Nick and Fetch bring? Isn't that for us?
To put it simply, the B story is Ginger and Rocky learning to let go and finding out how to stop being such overprotective parents. I'm not quite sure what's so bad about just spitting it out and telling your toddler that pretty much every land-dwelling mammal wants to eat you, and you would probably last about 20 minutes before becoming someone's lunch. The catalyst sees Molly deciding to take her own life. No. The catalyst sees Molly deciding to take her life into her own hands and travel across the water into the real world, the utopia that is Northern England, where everyone is happy all the time, forever. She saw her opportunity for freedom and exploration and took it, a desire that Ginger is still grappling with. Debate is the story beat that's meant to show the insecurity our main characters have about the decision to embark on the journey ahead. Molly has clearly made a decision that's important to her after seeing her mother's cowardice at the chicken town hall. She wants to prove to herself that she is capable of going on her own adventure and looking after herself, another theme of the film. Molly is obviously scared out of her mind, and she realizes that perhaps she is delicious, especially in a pot pie or breaded and put between two buns. And yes, she would be correct. Break Into 2 is when Ginger, Rocky, and the rest of the chicken team start to sail over the water to land to investigate the disappearance of Molly. The part of herself that Ginger has been dreading is finally rearing its head, and she now doesn't have a choice but to venture out if she's to save her. Break Into 2 generally means characters are moving from their own thesis world into the antithesis world. In this case, the chickens are having to travel from their safe haven communist nightmare into basically heaven on earth where no one has ever done any wrong. Yorkshire. Fun and games is the point of the film where we're offered the promise of the premise. It's normally where we see stuff from the trailer or the biggest action shots. When I found Chicken Run on the Netflix home screen, I was thrilled when I found out I wouldn't have to doom scroll for 10 to 12 minutes before landing on a well-crafted Korean game show. Before pressing play, I already had an idea of what to expect, a heist or escape movie starring chickens in desperate situations. The next few scenes embody that. They find the chicken farm truck and Molly by looking through the window and manage to track it down to find some kind of chicken industrial plant that looks like an evil lair. Once again, taking elements of the first film and turning up the heat to offer something bigger, better, but more importantly, different. Molly manages to escape the brainwashing collars and is trouncing around the chicken playground, wondering what all the fuss is about being in the outside world. By the way, this must have been the least profitable chicken operation ever. The speed at which they're turning chickens into nuggets is going to take decades to turn a profit. Think of the overhead. Ginger and the chicken gang actually managed to hatch a plan to break in. We have something of a Chekhov's gun when we see some of the weapons and the tools the chickens are bringing along the journey. Chekhov's gun is when we see a weapon or a story element earlier in the film, which normally means it will be used later, or at least it should be used later. The plan begins executing and starts off pretty well, apart from Rocky, who is basically bungling his way through the compound, much like myself through life. Before we know it, we're at the midpoint. Molly finds a truly horrifying discovery that all of these chickens are to be ground up and made into delicious chicken nuggets, raising the stakes, which is what should always happen at the midpoint. We find out our old nemesis is back, the trailblazer Mrs. Tweedy, who is revolutionizing not only the chicken industry, but also neuroscience, with this incredibly sophisticated chicken mind control device for what looks like the 1960s? She's managed to not only manipulate multiple men to serve her obsessive chicken desires, but also seems to continuously defy death. Tweedy captures Ginger after having traumatic flashbacks of a chicken not only escaping from a compound, but building a literal aircraft, outsmarting her on multiple occasions, sending her plummeting to her death, where she somehow made a miraculous recovery after likely many months of therapy. The bad guys close in, Tweedy hooks Ginger up, James Bond style, and attaches a mind control device to her neck. BGC... No, we're not doing that. Bad guys close in is the point where the enemy starts to get more powerful and the issues are starting to mount for our main characters. We find out Tweedy's true intentions for the chickens. It's apparently part of a new innovation called the chicken nugget. The chicken nugget was actually invented in the 1950s by a student in New York, with the invention being shared more widely in 1963. And based on some of the stylings and wardrobes of the characters, and given the fact that the first Chicken Run took place in the 1950s according to the IMDb page, I would guess the era this film takes place would be the 60s. Anyway, Rocky is getting chased by actual bad guys as they actually close in, and the rest of the chicken team are learning to take control of their own adventure without Ginger. The team falls into a silo of corn and start reconciling their fate as Rocky jumps in from safety like a massive bellend. This brings us to All Is Lost in Dark Knight of the Soul. The chicken team starts to panic, and Molly realizes her monumental f*** up that probably led to her and her family being made into delicious breaded morsels of horror. She sobs and reflects on how her desire to always want more and the desire for adventure may have led to everyone she loves being taken away. Ginger and Rocky are there to make her feel better by opening up about their fears. That's when Ginger says,
I guess I was afraid you were so much like me.
What's wrong with being like you?
bringing the main theme back around once again, as Molly is a representation of Ginger and Rocky's old lives, not just the chickens they used to be, but the chickens they are. This is the Dark Knight of the Soul moment of reflection for our characters, the point where they recognize the importance of their journey. After Korn starts to rumble and spin, the gang panic when Rocky remembers what happens to Korn when it's heated up really quickly, cashing in on that economy of story earlier on. The Chekhov's gun principle comes back around when the fireworks from the backpack earlier is unpacked. Then finally, after realizing they have no way of lighting the rocket, Molly remembers a trick she learned from her dad for concentrating light with a magnifying glass, showing she isn't just a reflection of Ginger, but Rocky as well. They manage to very evenly pop all the corn in the silo, sending them up to the sky, escaping the compound. But it means little when Molly reveals her determination to save her new friend Fizzle, no matter the cost, an act that reminds Ginger of who she used to be. In turn, Ginger is also learning to let go, accepting her daughter's desire to find adventure and fight for what's right, despite the risks.
She is a lot like me.
This is Break Into 3, moving us into the third act while also wrapping up the B story. For the finale, the chickens break their way back into the compound, with Molly going to unbrainwash Fizzle and free the rest of the chickens, and Ginger and Rocky looking to destroy the Nugget factory altogether. They run into Tweety, who insists on using an axe to kill Ginger when a firearm of some kind would probably work a little better in this scenario. Like a BB gun, that would probably do it. I always thought an axe would be a silly choice considering how evasive the chickens are, but I digress. After an insane series of events, somehow the axe manages to swing its way back around after Rocky ties it up with a rope midair, whacking Tweety twice, the second time knocking her head first into the chicken grinding Nugget machine, which is a truly horrifying fate. My wife and I at the same time both went, oh my god, that poor woman. This sends the chicken factory into overdrive, of course, and begins the classic escape before the building explodes trope. The gang gathers the rest of the chickens outside and into a truck to drive everyone home when we get a Hightower surprise in the form of a chicken nugget Tweety. It looks like she was ground up, seasoned and breaded, put back together, cooked, and still chooses violence. She jumps onto the truck before getting kicked off by Fowler and then cooked alive by her robot ducks. Just die already! Our final image brings us back to the former Soviet Union, where the chickens have changed into better chickens. The final image much of the time is a reflection of the opening image. Molly has found new confidence in herself through the journey, and the rest of the gang are using technology to do the work for them rather than creating food themselves. Ginger and Rocky are proud of not only who they are, but who they were, and have learned to allow Molly to go on her own adventures, scouting out in-trouble chicken farms on the strange floating cloud, which would have been super useful in the first film. The chicken commune is back to doing what they do best, going on adventures and getting into chicken trouble. Thanks for watching, subscribe to the channel, join me for more breakdowns and other stuff too. See you on the next one.